We have altered our electromagnetic or biochemical environment. We have distorted the input signals so much that our body has no idea what's going on and it's guessing. That's confusion and that's inflammation. Your phone is probably the #1 source of EMFs, and second place isn't even close. People think Apple's the bad guy. Actually, it was Motorola, because that's when this stuff started to come out.
Let's talk about what you've come to understand regarding blue light and the technology that's inside of our devices.
This is dehumanizing our population. That's because of the light. That's because of the entire electromagnetic spectrum that we've created. The meta advertising model proliferates the hardware model to be as stimulating and addicting as possible. And now we hand that to our children and wonder why mental health and tantrums are the norm, mental health issues.
What's your opinion of blue light blockers?
I think they're great as a tool, but they're not the solution. I was so frustrated because there is no healthier alternative to technology. We're talking about the biggest companies in the world, and they have no incentive to change. We have a reflective display technology. It's a healthier iPad. The inspiration behind the product overall is how do we make it work with nature, with our biology. It's really intended to be a magic piece of paper.
Tristan Scott, my man, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm stoked for this. So we'll be talking about this, obviously, on this episode, this daylight computer, which I've absolutely loved. And more importantly, as I told you, my kids love it because it's a tough thing when a lot of your own business is on these devices, is done on these devices, to tell your kids, no, you cannot use them at all. So we've taken a different approach with that, where we've had conversations with our son, because he's old enough, he's 8.5, for him to determine his own threshold of how much technology he uses based on a conversation with us. Like, hey, you notice that you start to get a little bit agitated when you're on these for an extended period of time. What do you think is a good amount for you to be on them? And he came up with an 1.5 hours, but he's like bumping up against 1.5 hours. And he turns it into this thing where it's like he's wanting to earn more time. And almost all of his other activities, cleaning his room or whatever it is oriented around how he can earn more time to be on devices. And it's like creating this complex. We're trying to figure it out. But what I've noticed in him using this, and he's only used it a little bit, but even just the time that he has, and what I've heard other parents say who have this device, is that there's no issue with trying to pull them off, because this isn't a dopamine driving blue light addictive technology that they're dealing with, like a lot of the modern technology that we're typically dealing with these days. So we'll get to that later in the episode, but I actually wanted you to start by sharing where you got your shoes again. You're not here to plug shoes, but it was just so funny the way that you said it. And those are actually some pretty dope shoes.
I am very excited because I've been in the barefoot grounding, like esoteric space. And whenever you get like new products, you get really excited. But yeah, we were at Bitcoin Prague. So I'm a big Bitcoiner, sovereignty advocate. The Bitcoin community has actually embraced daylight pretty strongly. So that was a fantastic conference. And next door to us, they put the two like light companies next to each other. And it was these Slovakian brothers that have a light company selling red lights, light bulbs, etc. But then they were like, yeah, we also have grounding shoes. And I was like, no way. Like, let me see them. And I was like, oh, they actually look normal. They have a wide toe box. So they're grounded with a kind of graphene infusion. So it's not a copper plug, which I am a bigger fan of. Wide toe box, minimalist. And there's like pig skin on the insoles. And these guys just did them like themselves. They're super diehard. They're more diehard than kind of anyone I've met, and they're building a business out there. So even if you don't know fully, like there's folks across the world that are really diving down these rabbit holes. And I think it's incredible.
It's amazing, man. So amazing. We're in a very exciting time to be alive. I feel like the word that keeps coming back for me is precipice. It's like we're on the precipice of a completely new paradigm, and we're getting to be active in that process, especially you with being one of the pioneers behind daylight. Actually, this is a good segue though, since we're talking about grounding and grounded shoes. First, I want to give the context though. You're an electrical engineer, so maybe we should get your background first and how you got on this sort of health journey, alternative tech journey. And then I'd like to get into grounding as a first topic.
Yeah. So I was telling you pre-show, I'm very fortunate to have been raised by a mom who's from Austria. So she really grounded, no pun intended, like this value set of like natural living. And we did not have a standard American upbringing. I was the only one of my friends in high school still that had to be home for a home cooked meal every single night. Sometimes was eating 2 dinners just to appease like everyone. And yeah, it was always like real food. And I appreciated that heavily. And we went to Austria every summer or every other summer. And Austria is a country that it's kind of like Italy. Like they take a lot of pride in their food, in their kind of just quality of living. It's probably the only country I would drink the tap water in, and the tap water, like 80 to 90% of Vienna's tap water comes from the mountains where my mom grew up. And it's like 150 years ago. And ironically, also her town in the Alps was known in the early 1900s as one of those like fresh air healing towns and healing resorts. And now I've learned about like the importance of negative ions in the air and how when you're in a city that's not present, and in nature and around water, that's so much stronger. So it's so weird how full circle it is. But yeah, so I had that kind of baseline. And then, I went to school for electrical engineering because I was good at math and science. My dad was an electrical engineer. I was like, well, this is going to be a good starting place for a career, no matter what. Didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. Rochester Institute of Technology. So in the frozen tundra of Rochester, New York.
It's funny because we call West Point, where I went, South Hudson Institute of Technology. Shit.
There we go. Yeah, all the ITs in the Northeast. It's not the most exciting college experience because the weather sucks and it's a really hard, degree program. So I was spending, 40 hours a week in the library. But when the weather's terrible, you're less incentivized to go outside or skip class. So it was good for that. I also played soccer in college, and that kind of led me to suffering one too many concussions, like right after my soccer career ended. A lot of them came from that. And yeah, I lost control of my health because I did everything wrong in like the acute healing phase of having a concussion because I didn't really know that I had one. And I basically had post-concussive syndrome symptoms, daily headaches, sensitivity to noise, light, sound, like across the board for over a year. And I couldn't exercise. I went from being an engineering student, college athlete, to like sleeping 13 hours a night, not being able to do anything. It was getting worse and worse. And then I had a break for that summer where I went to Oregon for an internship, and I started to feel better. And I started to realize, because I was spending my weekends out in nature again, my roommate was like super big on camping, and the Oregon summers are beautiful. And I started to build some momentum. I started meditating. I started reading books, self-healing. The brain changes itself was like profound. Then I started listening to Ben Greenfield on Rogan, and then went down that biohacking rabbit hole and started to try stuff. And I got better through lifestyle interventions. And from there, that was it. I was hooked. I was like, I'm graduating college, 22 years old. I think I'm going to keep learning about health because I want to keep getting better. I wasn't like back to baseline at that point. It was 2019. And then I was just like, this is one of the most important things. Like, of course, you want to know a lot about your health. This is going to be foundational for the rest of your life and also everyone you ever come into contact with. So that was a big thing. And then COVID happened, of course, in 2020. And I was very primed to have an opinion, a perspective, and cemented my belief that really we kind of were just living in a corrupt, centralized system that was taking away from our quality of life, and that we are trading it for convenience over and over again. And we were, getting kind of inching closer to really that going overboard. But of course, COVID was, like for many, a wake-up call. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was working remote. I decided to move to Salt Lake City and then Wyoming, where my sister lived. And it gave me the flexibility working remote to just like keep learning, keep studying while having my engineering job in the semiconductor industry. And simultaneously, I was very interested in Bitcoin. And 2020 again happened. I read The Creature of Jekyll Island. I had been in crypto for a few years at that point, but then they started printing all this money, and I was like, oh, okay, this clicks for me. And then I was really struggling, like in late 2020 or early 2021. I was like, I'm really passionate about Bitcoin and health. And I was like, well, I want to like work or do stuff in one of these spaces. And then it dawned on me, it was for the same reason. It was like, well, I'm really into Bitcoin. I'm really into health and wellness and optimization because I want to like have control over my life, and money and health are the two most important things in your life. So it really came down to me realizing sovereignty was like the kind of common denominator there. And then I did something weird. I had made a health Instagram page and I was like posting some stuff, but I was like, who's going to listen to me? I don't have anything credible to say. So I decided to write a book instead called Bitcoin and Beef that talked about classic name. I wrote that in 2021, came out in early 2022. It talked about issues with our health system, food system, and how that was all connected to centralization and fiat money. And, now looking back, I think it's crazy that I wrote that in 2021.
Pretty accurate too.
And it's only gotten more accurate over time. So it's brilliant. And then I got on social media, on Twitter, mostly talking about that stuff, was really passionate about regenerative agriculture, like wanted to kind of proliferate that message that like reconnecting natural systems was the way to heal the environment, the land, and the nutrient dense food. This is what centering our diet around matters, and nature knows best. And, as most health journeys start, the diet is always the first place because it's very tangible. And then, during this whole process, I'm fine tuning my lifestyle to a higher and higher degree. And the more time I was spending outside, connected in the natural world, the better I was feeling. I was like, I couldn't exercise at all in 2018, limited in 2019, and 2022, 2023, I was starting to like climb mountains and do things that I'd ski like 50 days a year, things that I'd never done before. So I was feeling a lot better. And then I kind of hit a point where I was like, well, I think I'm done with the regenerative ag diet stuff. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a rancher. Like, what's next? And being on social media and being an electrical engineer, I saw some people talk about light and EMFs and grounding. And I had been doing, I bought a pair of blue light blockers in like 2018, 2019. It was one of the first things that actually helped my concussion. I was grounding. I was watching sunrise for like 5 years, but I never went super, super deep. And in late 2022, early 2023, I got kind of more exposed to that world. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm meant to like.
Who are your primary teachers, if you will?
Well, I definitely got introduced to like Jack Kruz's work, but I realized what was important about his message, because he's very sensationalist, of course, and controversial. And he's been profound with daylight, and I love him, but he's also, he is who he is. And I'm very like, I don't know.
He blocked me on Instagram.
I'm very stubborn in the way that I don't like to just listen to something and like take it at its face value.
Totally.
I want to go and research and learn it all myself. So I listened to a couple of his podcasts and immediately just went and read all of the books. And I had like read some stuff before. I was familiar, like The Invisible Rainbow, some of these like easier books to read. But then I really just read like all the papers, like Robert O. Becker, Andrew Marino, all of the research from the 20th century and up to the more recent stuff on light from Scott Zimmerman and, Martin Powell and Henry Lai, all these guys that everyone, they've been either canceled or no one's heard of them unless you're in that space. So that's what Jack, was really great for, is like uncovering the information. And because of my background, I was able to synthesize this very, very quickly. And it made a lot of sense to me because I'm very familiar. I took physics my whole life, and I realized that there was this huge gap online of educating on these topics. There's a lot of nuance. Light is a lot easier to understand than the rest of the electromagnetic spectrum. But even then, people weren't really seeing the kind of bigger picture and the nuance that exists in it. And I decided to actually start my own podcast then. It was called Decentralized Radio, because I now had realized that I had enough knowledge and I wanted to talk to people and like record it. And I thought it would be, fun to try that. And that went really well. And I basically just interviewed researchers, doctors, sometimes ranchers, sometimes Bitcoiners. And it was funny because the interview, finally, I think after a year, I like purposely pushed it off to interview Dr. Jack Kruz. And we talked about EMFs, and it was a prolific interview. And during that, he was like, "You're an engineer, you get it. You need to talk to Unjin from Daylight Computer." And I was like, okay, I've never heard of this. Like, what is that? And he connected us with Unjin, podcasted with him. And it was funny because I had left my engineering job about 3 months earlier. I was like, doubling down on the podcast. It was growing. It was doing really well. I was like trying to do some like health consulting. I was like, this doesn't feel like me. I almost worked for a Bitcoin company. That didn't feel right. Cause I was like, it's easy. You just buy Bitcoin. I'm not a finance. I have a lot more to offer here. And I spoke with Unjin, and halfway through the podcast, it was like, oh, like this is what I'm meant to do. Because I have this background in the semiconductor industry, I know the biological impacts of electromagnetism more than, nearly anyone. And I was so deeply passionate about this, and a lot of connections from social media at that time, had already had tens of thousands of followers on Twitter and knew everyone. So I was like, this is perfect. And immediately, jumped on board and kind of joined forces with Unjin, and it was perfect because I realized in my own life, and you probably realized it as well. You kind of get control of your health. You optimize your lifestyle. You're eating great. You're sleeping great. You're getting outside, but you're spending more and more time on your devices. You're spending more and more time on the internet because that's where all your business is. That's where your network. It's all in the digital world. And I'm super sensitive because of my past of concussions. And I actually started plateauing. I started feeling like worse when I was spending more time on screens, especially on my phone. And now I knew why. And I was so kind of frustrated because there is no healthier alternative to technology. There is no grass-fed iPhone. There's nothing. We're talking about the biggest companies in the world, and they have no incentive to change. They sell tens of millions of units a year, and they kind of tease us with things like night mode. But in reality, they don't care about our health and wellness. The whole business model is centered around consumption. We are the product, and the meta advertising model proliferates the hardware model to be as stimulating and as attention capturing and addicting as possible. And now we hand that to our children and wonder why mental health and tantrums are the norm, mental health issues. So yeah, it was one of those things where you're like, this is insane. Like, this is too perfect. Everything in my life that I'd done the past 10 years now perfectly gives me the experience to lead and make daylight a success, make healthier technology actually possible. So that's the backstory, man. And it's been a wild journey, and I'm so grateful, and it's a blast.
Epic backstory, man. So cool, because it seems like you're so on your path. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing as someone who's an electrical engineer through training, and then also health interested, working with a company that's obviously using electrical engineering or needing an electrical engineer that is health oriented. It's amazing. It's incredible.
There's no coincidences, right? No. And it's like, sometimes I say you wonder why certain things are happening in your life, and you just need to have faith, right? And when you kind of relinquish and have faith in your purpose in this world, it's the ultimate cheat code. And that's kind of how we run Daylight. Like, a lot of things, Unjin as well, like super faith driven and purpose driven, because this company should have failed. Like, it should not be where it is right now. The barrier to entry, the amount of luck, quote unquote, right? And even this past year, like every time. And I think it's just the ultimate testament to it's meant to be. And for anyone struggling or unsure, you just need to trust and have faith that it's going to work out in the best for you if you believe it.
Amen. Amen, man. Okay, let's get into some topics, because you, as an electrical engineer, I'm just really fascinated to talk to you about some of the things related to EMFs as it applies to our body. Obviously, the harms of non-native EMFs and things like that, but also the electrical system inside of us. Because I think a lot of what mainstream science claims to know about the human body is based in a biochemical paradigm, completely missing the bioelectrical aspects of who we are. And I got to give a shout out to my friend Eileen McCusick, who's been instrumental in me learning, like I'd say, beginning to understand. So I majored in systems engineering, and I'll say majoring in systems engineering, we had to take baseline classes for all the other facets of engineering, and electrical engineering was my worst one by far. By far my worst one. I just could not wrap my head around it. Mechanical engineering, I could see how the equations would relate to observable reality. But when we're talking about electricity, inherently it's something that is microscopic or submicroscopic, right? So it's super hard for me to wrap my mind around. That being said, though, I understand that this is a big piece that a lot of people, even in the so-called alternative health space, are completely missing. And then there's a lot of misconceptions, I'd imagine, from your vantage point. So let's start with grounding. So Have you looked into Dr. Gerald Pollack's work at all, by the way?
Gerald Pollack and I are friends. Yes. I love him. Yeah. He came to my sovereignty event in Wyoming 2 years ago, actually.
Dude, that makes me so happy. Okay. Because if you had said no, that would have made me really sad, because like I am a Gerald Pollack maximalist. Let's put it that way. You're a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm a Gerald Pollack maximalist. Like I see health through the lens of fourth phase water. We're likely comprised of it. I don't think we have any direct evidence in vivo that we are, but all indications point to we're comprised of a variety of hydrophilic surfaces on and inside of our body. We're comprised of water. The likelihood that we have fourth phase water inside of us is very high. So with grounding, what are some misconceptions you see typically in the wellness space regarding grounding? And that's a big question.
In the wellness space, that's a good point. I feel like, what do people normally say? Touch grass, you're absorbing negative ions. It's really electron flow at the end of the day. Yeah. I think at this point, I think the biggest misconceptions are around grounding, or the biggest points of concern for me are like grounding into your outlet.
That's okay. That's where I was going to go next.
Grounding sheets and grounding mats.
What's the problem with those?
Yeah. So inherently, people that sell grounding equipment and mats, and Clint Ober did a lot of this research with Gaetan Chevalier, who I've also interviewed before. And these guys are great. And they showcased that even when you ground into your outlet, you're getting this, beneficial effect. It's reducing inflammation and all these markers, which I'm sure is true because you're still absorbing electrons. But the problem with that is you're plugging into a 60 hertz circuit, right? And even if, which in most cases it's not, the wiring in the home is perfect. We have like floating grounds and floating neutrals. We have a very janky electrical system in general. And what you're doing is you're putting your body in the path to ground when you're plugging into that circuit. So some people will debate this, but you can kind of measure it on an oscilloscope pretty easily. Even if you're grounded, you're going to be exposed to some amount of dirty electricity or some amount of AC, electromagnetic fields.
So it's going to be offsetting the beneficial impact that you're getting.
Dependence is how electron deficient are you, to where maybe it's still a net benefit or net positive. But anecdotally, and I have friends that have grounding companies. Anecdotally, it's a mixed bag. Like probably the majority of people are so deficient that they'll still have a net benefit, but it also depends on the quality of wiring in your house. So what's the simple solution? Just plug a metal rod in your front yard or your backyard and run that to the grounding sheet. That's plugging into the actual earth, which is the real source of negative ions, or electrons, I should say, negative surface charge.
Charge.
And it's completely isolated from your entire electrical power grid. So that's the best way to do it.
Is that where you see like where someone puts a stake in their yard and then runs a wire like through their window and then it's touching their bed?
Yes.
That'd be the best way.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we ground electrical systems as well. They ground with a grounding rod into the earth. The other option you could sometimes, like plumbing, like metal water pipes or something in your house could also be grounded. So that could be an alternative option if you live, like in this room right here, we're on the third floor. It's probably going to be, or second floor. It's going to be hard for you to like drive something into the actual ground. Sometimes there's not even grass anywhere near where you're living. And that's kind of a tricky situation. The other misconception around grounding is that people say it reduces, it protects you from EMFs. That is definitely not true, because they're communicating that in a direct relationship. Like if you're grounding, EMFs like won't affect you. That's not true at all. What the misconception is that because when you measure something like body voltage, now we're talking about AC electric fields being induced on your body, and you can measure that with a basic multimeter and just turn it to AC voltage. And if you're in a room like right now, if we measured it, there would be like probably like 1 to 2 volts AC on my body. It happens through a process called like capacitive coupling, because basically humans, our biology is basically like a capacitor, especially the skin. And when you ground, that reading will go to 0. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Like no one turned the power off in here. No one turned the EMFs off. That just means you're grounding that electric field through your body. So that debatably, and what I will tell you about everything that I say on here, I am giving my best opinion. We really don't know. And the more you learn about all of these electromagnetic, quantum, biological processes, we know so little about how this works. And a lot of the, inspiration I'm pulling from is from 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 80 years ago. So I don't know if that's better or worse. If you have induced currents and you're grounding that through your body, or induced voltage, that could potentially be worse.
So what you're saying essentially in layman's terms is that, for example, if you are barefoot outside and you're on your phone, that might be worse than if you're wearing like rubber-soled shoes outside on your phone. Possibly.
I think, yeah, potentially. I think for radio frequencies, since it's so much less power density is far, far less, I would say that's probably, not the case. But yeah, that's why some people like Dr. Cruz to say like never ground in a big city. And I'm like, well, that's a blanket statement. You can't really say one way or the other, but you can make the argument that it certainly is not protecting you. The reason why people say it's protecting you is because what do non-native electromagnetic fields do? They induce oxidative stress. They cause free radical production. They cause mitochondrial dysfunction. Well, how do you combat that? With, free electrons, with antioxidants. And the ultimate source of antioxidants is, the immobile electrons themselves, which you can get from the earth, the negative surface charges. And that's why people say as well, like it protects you from EMFs, but it's not a direct relationship, and it's a lot more nuanced. So I would say those two things are kind of the biggest misconceptions with grounding. So how do you kind of get over that? Well, I would say always ground into the actual earth. Make sure you have an isolated circuit. I'm a fan of like the dispersed grounding mats. Always ground in step number one, mitigate EMFs as much as you possibly can. Because here's the other thing, a grounding mat is conductive. If you have a super hot bedroom, that grounding mat is also going to hold charge, and you're going to be absorbing more of those not so great for you field charges when you're on that mat. So number one rule, get the EMF environment as best as you possibly can, especially in your bedroom. You should be doing that anyway. And then figure out the grounding and do it in your front yard or your backyard into the actual earth. Now, if you're in a city or you're in a super hot area, and you want to go and put bare feet on the earth, like in a park, like you should just do that. Like I think there's more beneficial things coming from that regardless, and not worry about
even
that.
Unmeasurable.
Like connect. To me, the most important thing about health is connection to our local environment and to the earth. And chronic disease can be summarized as a disconnection from that completely, because we have altered our electromagnetic or biochemical environment, and our bodies no longer know where we are. And for that, it cannot optimize. All we need to do is get out of the way. Our body knows how to optimize and adapt to the environment. We just need to give it the input signals, right? And engineer here. So I always say this, if you align the input signals, the outputs, the energy, the libido, the hormones, the emotions, the spirituality, that will be optimized. But we have distorted the input signals so much that our body has no idea what's going on, and it's guessing, and that's confusion, and that's inflammation.
Amen. I'm curious, what's your house like? What's your EMF environment like? I'm sure you get that all the time.
At home, I have Wi-Fi, but it's 90% shielded, and I run Ethernet to all my devices. That's because I have an annoying Wi-Fi router that I can't fully disable. And sometimes it's nice to just like have Wi-Fi to pop something open, but that's how I have the Wi-Fi. Everything's off at night for sure. Like there's no electronics anywhere near my sleep environment. The Wi-Fi is off.
Circuit breaker off
my
too?
Circuit breaker to my bedroom and the surrounding walls is always off. There's no power in it ever. I also have like breakers from the 60s. So I don't recommend flipping circuit breakers every night. They're not like a light switch. They're not mechanically designed to switch all the time. So turning your breaker and your Wi-Fi off are the top two things you could do for your electromagnetic environment at nighttime.
But it's bad to switch them on and off like that, like every night?
Yeah, they could malfunction, and you could this is, high power electricity. So it could be dangerous. I don't recommend that. But what you can do, they actually make relays, or you could get a custom relay switch installed by an electrician to where you can get like a remote control that actually switches it. in a safe way. So that is like, probably costs you $1,200 to $2,000 to do that on a few circuits. That's huge. Like, and we're talking about here, why is the sleep environment so important? Because guess what you have the most control over? Your sleep environment, your home environment. If you're in a 9 to 5, if you're at the office, if you're traveling, you have no control over the electromagnetic environment outside of your own personal devices, which you should always be cognizant of. And I think your phone is probably the number one source of EMFs, and second place isn't even close. So yeah, because what do you have on you all the time? Distance is the most important thing to know about electromagnetic waves. And this includes light and the rest of the spectrum. Because if it's increase the distance 2x, you 2 squared the intensity reduction. It's an inverse square law. So distance is your best friend. And then the other best friend is duration of exposure. Now people are always like, airport scanners, oh my God, they're like killing us. And I'm like, you go through that thing, the power density is not really that high, and you go through it for about 0.2 seconds. But there's 10,000 people around you. They're all on 5G and all on Wi-Fi. And your phone's in your pocket on. The L3 airport scanner's not doing anything.
I've thought about that a lot, man. Like because I'm one who typically opts out of that. And there's a freedom principle associated with it too. Like I'm not going to allow this to continue to happen. I'm going to be the one who makes it very difficult for people. And it's because I see the slippery slope of tyranny. Like TSA was supposed to be a temporary measure, for example, right? And here we are, right? Now digital IDs are looming. But the point is like, I've thought about that so much being on my phone. Like I'm getting way more radiation from my phone with the amount that I'm on it than I am going through an airport scanner for like 2 seconds.
Distance and duration. So that's where if you can put more distance and you can decrease the duration of the exposure, like a lot of these studies showing harmful effects, and there's thousands of them, as I'm sure you're aware, your audience is aware. A lot of them are chronic duration of exposure. We're talking greater than 24 hours. And, that might sound like, well, that's not so bad. I'm not really exposed. No, you are exposed. If you don't turn your Wi-Fi off, even if you do, your breaker's off, your phone off, you're never getting a break. I mean, it's 24/7, 365. And that's my whole argument here is it's easy to talk about the food and the water and all this stuff. It's very tangible. But the only thing you're exposed to 24/7, 365 days a year is really electromagnetic inputs. And that's driving our biology in the really wrong direction right now. So turn your phone on airplane mode, use speakerphone, use wired headphones. If you can stand the air tube headphones, they're even better. A lot of them are garbage. Maybe we'll make a pair of those. I turn the breakers off. You can get a relay installed. Turn the Wi-Fi off. If you're super sensitive, sick, I would hardwire everything. If it's your forever home, just invest in that up front to get it hardwired. Ideally, if you live like in a more rural area, of course, you're going to have less exposure. But people are always worried about the 5G tower down the street. You got to worry about the 5G transceiver that's in your pocket. That's way more important.
Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, FORWARD, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember.
You know, I've made this argument quite a bit as it pertains to virology. I don't know if you know, that's like a big piece of my thing, that what happens when you introduce something that is not necessarily a novel technology, because I understand millimeter wave technology has been around for quite some time, but novel in the sense that our phones are all equipped to receive it, and there are towers being put up all over the place. If Arthur Furstenberg's book, rest in peace to him, The Invisible Rainbow, is any indication, there's going to be some novel symptoms associated with that and some widespread illness. And I'm not one who says that 5G is the replacement for virus. There are a variety of other things in our environment. It's unique to the individual, but like it's a big thing. And it's I think a good argument to be made that if we have these devices that we're carrying around all the time that are equipped with again, novel technology in the sense of this first time that is being rolled out in mass, could that induce symptoms that are a little bit different than usual? Absolutely, it could.
Absolutely. We really have no idea. And what's interesting is to think about, like that next echelon. That is why 5G was so kind of controversial. I mean, still to this day, and we don't really even know the extent of it. You probably don't have much out here. I definitely don't have millimeter waves in Wyoming. So that's the benefit here, right? If you want to get away, the downside of millimeter waves and higher frequency bands is their range is terrible. That's why they had to install all these repeater towers, because they actually drop out like every 100 yards. Physical barriers actually do block them because of the frequency band that they're in. So the infrastructure doesn't even support from a logical perspective.
Why is it quote unquote better than from a telecommunications perspective?
Because the data throughput is far higher. So like basically every generation is trying to like 10 to 100x improve the data throughput and reduce the latency speed to a similar degree. So it's just like the bandwidth, the ability to get data through with all of the new devices, all of the AI, the smart cities, all that stuff, right? And that's where millimeter waves, and I've talked to people who have worked at Verizon, they're really only rolled out in downtown areas, airports, entertainment centers, super high concentrated areas. So even if you work in a city like Austin, but you live in the suburbs, you're probably not going to be exposed to millimeter waves that much, which is great. And we don't really know the biological effects. Like I have read the research papers on the similar frequencies. And what's really kind of interesting as well is people always think it's the frequency. And that's where people are like, Bluetooth, you're putting a microwave on your head because it's the same exact frequency. Now that is true. But a lot of the research from like Alan Frey, and even that was in the 80s or maybe 70s as well, and Dr. Martin Paul recently have found that if you take an electromagnetic field, it's the same frequency, and one is continuous and one is like modulated as it is with data, with information. The one that's modulated with data and information is like magnitudes worse. Almost like sometimes the continuous wave is almost like statistically has no impact on biology. So that tells me it's not just about the frequency. It's the way the waves are engineered and modulated to carry the data, the information of our messages that we're sending, of the actual content of those packets. And the 5G waves are engineered to a greater degree than ever before. They have things like kind of wave beamforming and steering, and they're highly targeted because of that super kind of the poor range. They concentrated the power behind it, which is problematic, but then at the same time, it's less dispersed omnidirectionally. So it's actually easier to avoid it. And that's where, if you don't have to be in a downtown city or a highly populated area, I would not be. And that's where, if you go into these areas and maybe you feel worse, that could be an impact. I think there's just the greater density is going to be probably the number one impact, but maybe the 5G millimeter waves is what I like to call the cherry on top of like the toxic EMF cake that we already have been exposed to for years. And it's only increasing because we're only increasing the amount of devices that are existing and the amount of time everyone's spending on them.
You know, it's so interesting because I think a lot of people in the wellness space get hung up on just 5G itself, forgetting there's a whole like spectrum of devices that are on other areas of the electromagnetic spectrum that are also inducing harmful effects on our body that go completely ignored. I won't say by everyone, but by a lot of people because there's so much focus on 5G. And that being said, there is some unique aspects about millimeter wave technology. From my understanding, like the military has an active denial system, which is based on millimeter wave technology. Can you share about that a little bit?
Yeah. The military, I think, has had this since the 90s. It's basically a 90 gigahertz wave, which is maybe twice the frequency of what we're using for telecommunication. Still in the millimeter wave category. And at a very high power density, when that wave hits a human body, it heats up tissue so fast that it feels like you're on fire. And they can use that to basically move people. They can use it to deter crowds, or if you read I forget what, it's like military weapons report. Some of this is public information. They have, it's like to deter aggression from, adversaries of the military. And that could be, the public. I think during COVID, they used these things in Australia. That was kind of at least a rumor, right? But that's electromagnetic waves. It's nothing else. And warfare in general is heading more and more in this direction. So we're talking about technology that's probably 20 to 30 years old already. They have a lot more. That's probably even more scary.
Well, this is what I was going to ask. I don't want to get like too like doom and gloom, dark and conspiratorial, but I am interested, man, because there's a lot of talks surrounding directed energy weapons and things like this. And I'm not like, I wouldn't assume that you would be the expert on all this stuff to the degree that like, ins and outs of all the details, but you are an electrical engineer and you're interested in this stuff. I'm assuming you've researched some of it. So like, first off, what are your thoughts on directed energy weapons? And then also, what are your thoughts on the supposed ability to, I've interviewed this guy, Chris Crutchfield, who is one of my best friends, who did a deep dive on Sabrina Wallace's work. Are you familiar with her at all? Okay, I'm going to try to articulate this as best I can. Supposedly, the government has technology and has had technology for a while, and telecommunications companies, to like, for lack of a better term, hijack and manipulate our biofield. And through wearables, through our devices that we have in our home, through Wi-Fi, through Bluetooth, they have this ability to where they can possibly read our thoughts through the biofield. I know that sounds so crazy and out there, but Sabrina Wallace has some pretty interesting work on this. She's like a telecommunications whistleblower, essentially. And okay, let's start with the first one, though, directed energy weapons, and we can get to that.
I mean, what I just said, that's a directed energy weapon right there, like the active denial system. Yeah. I mean, they have solid state lasers. All of that is like super directed energy. I actually had an internship for the Navy and worked on like some small parts of like the railgun program. And that's pure like projectiles, but it's generating so much energy upon release that's like you don't even need an explosive. It is the explosive itself. So yeah, of course, all these things are possible. I know there's like HARP and all of these conspiracies. And if again, a lot of this stuff we're talking about that's known is decades old. Of course, all these things are very much possible. They probably exist. And I think warfare in general is going to be drones and directed energy weapons. I don't even think that's a secret. Like you can read these military reports and it's pretty much what they say. They use very kind of precise language. But yeah, that's definitely a thing. So I guess that's concerning. But at the end of the day, I mean, if the military did want to like come to your house and take you out, like they could have done that for any time at any point in probably the last 100 years. So now it's just even more instantaneous. And then warfare is probably involving less ground soldiers than like before, which I don't know, is good or bad, but this
depends on how you look at it.
Does exist. Yeah. Now the mind control, that stuff is fascinating. There's definitely, been research done. I mean, what's his name? I think Delgado from Spain did a lot of kind of research on like bulls and things in the 80s, and chickens, researching kind of using different electromagnetic fields and pulses and basically being able to control their minds, like being able to make them super passive or super aggressive. And yeah, DARPA had these programs testing like microwave exposure in the 60s after the whole Russian embassy crisis, which is a fascinating Moscow signal rabbit hole. Basically, Russia was blasting the US embassy in Moscow with a microwave.
Is that confirmed?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
They just probably haven't admitted it
They
outright.
never admitted it, but the US did.
Okay.
The US, so yes, it is confirmed, but Russia never admitted it, or the USSR. And
is that different than Havana syndrome? Like the
Havana, yeah, that was different. So the Moscow signal was literally the Soviet Union is like very cognizant of EMFs, and they like pre-Cold War or early Cold War, they met with US scientists, and basically US scientists were like, no, this stuff doesn't matter. The way you guys do science is rudimentary and this is all nonsense. And that's why a lot of the EMF research actually is from the Soviet Union, from like the 60s to the 80s. That's decent and shows
also a lot of interesting water research from the Soviet Union
they're
too, which
super,
is wild.
and they have way more stringent safety standards even to this day. And what they did was to kind of get back and mock the US when the US came out with this absurd 10 milliwatt per centimeter squared radio frequency safety standard, that's power density, which they basically took the power density that has a thermal heating effect on the body and divided it by 10. And that's how they got the number, which is a joke because even at that time, they were already seeing harmful effects outside of just tissue heating, like cataracts and testicular function. In the 60s, Milton Zaret, I think, studied cataracts. He got canceled. Anyway, they blasted the US embassy with a wave just under like our safety limit to prove a point. And there's controversy, like 3 of 6 ambassadors ended up getting, cancer. And one of them famously pushed Kissinger like in public, and they did all these blood work tests and were like, no, these are routine, nothing's wrong. And they kind of, the US government lied to its own employees at the embassy, and then eventually got, there's a whistleblower and kind of got out there that this happened. But while that was going on, there's some project called Project Pandora where they're testing microwaves on monkeys. And there was like no issue after a couple days of exposure, but after a really long period of exposure, the monkeys they like didn't want to do anything. They literally just became super, super, super docile. And then they removed the exposure. They kind of went back to normal. And then they, even less duration, put them back in this kind of like completely just like dysfunctional, not like unhealthy, but docile state. And yeah, Robert O. Becker talks about more like electromagnetic field resonance between the US power grid 60 hertz and the Earth's magnetic field activates like lithium ions, which made rats more passive in a US Navy funded research study. So there's like some stuff out there. I mean, at this point, I think the real problem is we're all so desensitized because our entire dopamine is coming from devices in general. And it's probably a combination of the radio frequency, but even more so the artificial light, that I think they figured out mind control in an even more brilliant way, if you want to say that.
I mean, freaking blue light, dude.
They give it to us,
right,
and we choose to do it.
Willingly,
so we're voluntarily opting in to mind control. So I'm not super deep and versed into the conspiracy theories or whatever you want to call them at this point, because like it's true in that it exists today. It's clearly a harm. And how it got there, whether it was super nefarious or it was just engineering iterations, because sometimes that does happen where engineers just like, they don't know anything about biology and they iterate and they make things better, which ends up making things worse for the end user. To me, that doesn't matter. I'm here to look forward. And what's looking forward is how do we fix this? But history is fascinating, and you will always uncover some sort of little nugget that's like, wow, that's crazy. why has no one read this book before? I was reading books from like the 60s on electromagnetism.
Did you go through cognitive dissonance with your like standard electrical engineering training at Rochester?
Well, here's the thing. I had a concussion my last year of college. And in general, I was so busy as a student. I was just there to like get good grades, graduate, get a degree, and like leave. So pretty much electrical engineering in school is like 5 years of torture of math. So you don't really step back and think like of the greater things. Like I took an electromagnetic fields class and we were just like drawing charts all day and doing equations. So the principles, but I don't think they definitely didn't ever mention anything about potential impact on biology. So I was pretty removed from the deeper, I guess, sense of like core electrical engineering or electromagnetism until I started reading all this stuff. And it was almost better that way, because the problem with most electrical engineers, most technical people, is they think they're so smart because that's their career that they're like, no, there's no way non-ionizing radiation can cause harm. That's like a known fact. And their mind's completely closed. So it was almost better that I was kind of like already a bit distant from the actual practice. And I was more on the business side in the semiconductor industry anyway, but having that foundation of knowledge was really helpful.
Yeah, I bet that helped a lot. Yeah, let's talk about our phones a little bit now. So we'll probably cover some stuff that most people have heard, but it's always helpful to reiterate some of the points about the harmful effects of our phone. And I mean, again, it's a tough thing because I work so much on my devices. So much of my business is based online. And at the same time, that's why I'm so happy that something like this now exists, because I don't have to be bombarded with blue light. But let's talk about what you've come to understand regarding blue light and the technology that's inside of our devices that we commonly use.
Yeah, why are phones so bad for us? Well, first off, the form factor is demonic, in my opinion. Like, it's in your hand. It's so convenient. It's so much easier to scroll. You don't scroll as much on a tablet. You definitely don't scroll on your MacBook or your desktop as much. So that's one. We talked about the RF and the EMFs, but the light is really the main thing. And there's two components of it. There's the spectrum of light, and then there's also flicker, which flicker is super under discussed, I would say. And flicker, just to touch upon that first, is almost all LEDs, the way they control brightness now, especially in phones and handheld devices, is instead of just driving less current through the actual diode, the LED, they figured out that if you pulse the LED on and off, it has better color consistency and better power efficiency. So that is now the standard electrical engineering practice called pulse width modulation, or just pulse modulation, because there's a few different types of ways to do it. And basically all these lights, I mean, your phone especially, around 480 times per second, it's actually turning on and off. It's flashing, it's flickering. And that is so activating to our nervous system. It's so straining to our eyes, to our brain, and it's completely unnecessary.
Is it all for energy conservation? That's like the primary reason. And then
color consistency. Yeah, because diodes are semiconductors. So that's why different diodes are different colors. So the actual, intrinsic characteristics and current and voltage do matter, but we're talking not that big of a difference, right? But that's what Apple, that's what Google, they optimize for. They optimize for the best saturated colors, and power efficiency is the limiting factor. Just a quick aside, I think way more people would have brain cancer or effects from EMF if battery technology was better. Because when you look at the phones from like 2000 and 2005, they were bricks. They had unlimited battery. They lasted a week. So the output power of the antennas was way higher. It was way stronger. And now batteries are the limiting factor for everything. Especially now we're putting, language models and ChatGPT and all this stuff in them. They're even more limited. So Apple is incentivized to have less output power in terms of the antennas for cellular data and Wi-Fi, because it saves battery, not because they care about your health. So the newer models are actually trending in the right direction for output power of radio frequencies. Now that aside, the flicker is a problem because it's just above visual perception, right around 90 times per second. is where you can stop seeing flashing lights. Below that, you can see it. But when you're right above it and you can't see it, but your brain can perceive it, that's the worst zone to be in. And that's the zone that phones are in. Most tablets, for some reason, laptops, well, not for some reason, because laptops have not moved to OLED screens, they actually use a way higher frequency. Like my MacBooks are like 15 to 20,000 times per second or hertz. So that's so fast. The on and off is so fast that your brain actually can no longer tell. Right around like 10,000 times per second is the believed point threshold that you can no longer perceive it. And the higher it goes, the less of an impact it has. But when we switched to OLED screens, which happened at the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 11 Pro, flicker, pulse width modulation control of light became the norm, around 480 times per second for most iPhones. Some are 240. And that was my number one trigger for concussion-like symptoms to come back. And I had switched to an iPhone 13, I think in like 2023. And I started working more on my phone, especially when I started at daylight. I was traveling a lot. And my headaches were horrible, like brain fog every single day. And then I finally figured it out and I switched. I now use an iPhone 11 and I've told some people about this and it's now like catching on. I think I've seen like 5 or 6 health influencers tweeting about it. It was the biggest game changer, single product, biggest game changer for me, switching back to an iPhone 11.
I have a friend who has an iPhone 5 that still works, which is...
This thing dies in like 1 hour, I will say, but it's almost incentive to use your phone as little as possible and just use my daylight and my MacBook. So that's flicker. And that's like, you can get really drained when you're under LED lights and you're staring at your phone all day. The flicker is a large reason as to why. And there's other, components of flicker, like fluorescence used to flicker just because the ballast system they used to power the fluorescence were like super janky. So they used to, like the old school fluorescents were the worst lights ever. They used to flicker. The light spectrum was so bad. And that was like the norm all of a sudden in classrooms and hospitals and office lighting. I think that's switched now to LEDs, which are slightly better. So that's the flicker. The blue light, the light spectrum is the other part of it. And it's very distorted. So you pretty much have like 3 really high peaks of light coming off your phone screen. And one of them is super high and like 420 to 470 nanometer blue light, which, as you kind of got at in the beginning, I think blue light is not inherently bad for you. It's actually one, if not the most important spectrum of light because it's driving circadian biology to the highest degree, more than any other form of light. When you go outside, you're getting bathed in blue light, but that blue light is coming from a dispersed source. It's coming from the sun. It's not a single object. And blue light is the most stimulating, most dopaminergic form of light. It's really what lights your brain up, tells you to go and do things, tells you to, suppresses melatonin, spikes cortisol. It's wonderful. But when it's coming from a handheld object 6 inches from in front of your face, that's the world you're going to want to go explore. Is the digital world. And it's going to capture your attention to a degree that's going to make it very hard to put down. Now you take that fact and you put it in the hand of a child. Children don't have fully developed retinas. They let in 40 to 50% more blue light. And they also hold the devices on average 2 times, sometimes 3 times closer, depending how old they are. And what do we talk about? Distance. So that's actually maybe 9 times more blue light intensity going through their eyes. And simultaneously, they are ultra sensitive neurologically because what do? They're trying to map out their environment. They're trying to develop these neural circuits to succeed as humans, to actually get a footing in the world they're meant to be in. But the world we're giving them is the digital one. So it's a 100% mismatch. It's why when you take an iPad away from a kid, they have the worst tantrum in their entire life. It's because you've taken them out of the game. They were fully immersed. It's basically like they had a full VR headset on and you rip the reality out away from them. Of course, they're going to be upset. That's where they're getting all of their stimulation, their dopamine, their fulfillment from, as opposed to going outside. And people like to say, they're like, well, the blue light from the sun. It's like, yeah, well, that's a dispersed source, and you're in an environment that's vast and endless to go and explore and learn. And the other part is sunlight is predominantly infrared. It's 50% plus infrared from an energy perspective and 70+% from a photons per second perspective. And infrared light, a lot of you people know red light therapy it's mostly infrared light, long wavelengths, low energy, penetrates deep into the tissue, deep into the mitochondria, stimulates actually subcellular melatonin production, heals your body from an oxidative perspective. That's the majority of sunlight. So that's why we can be exposed to blue light, violet, ultraviolet. It's like saying, they say ultraviolet causes skin cancer. Well, we tested it in a lab and we only looked at the ultraviolet wavelength. Well, when in the existence of humanity have we only been exposed to ultraviolet wavelengths without the rest of the sun, without the infrared, without even the red, orange, yellow, green, blue? And that's the mismatch we have now. And the last component of the phones and technology in general is that it's not designed to be used outside. So inherently we're indoors where there's more EMFs because it's more concentrated. You're in, a closed environment and you are staring at this rectangle that's captured your attention because it's so, it's lit up like a Las Vegas casino. It's flashing. There's no sunlight and there's games on it. And people think it's just the games. It's really the environmental design that gets you. So that's the light component. And in general, people really, I think blue light has had this interesting kind of story the past 5 years. Like during COVID, everyone freaked out about blue light. Blue light blockers became super popular.
What's your opinion of blue light blockers?
I think they're great as a tool, but they're not the solution. I only wear mine when I'm traveling, to be completely honest.
There's a recent poll that I put out on all my social media channels, and 95% of people responded that they're struggling to find their health and freedom community in person. And don't get me wrong, these platforms, these devices that you're listening to or watching this podcast on right now are great for helping to disseminate information, helping us, find like-minded people to validate us, but they are not a replacement for real in-person community. At the core of our new community platform is a powerful, easy-to-use map helping you to instantly connect with like-hearted, like-minded community, including men and women, farms, schools, practitioners of all types, and other businesses near you. The platform also includes groups, social functions, messaging, and Platinum members also get access to our content library with footage from all of our in-person and virtual events like Confluence and the end of COVID, as well as breathwork sessions, Qigong sessions, member Q&As, and also member community calls. So if you'd like to support this podcast and support our mission of helping people to connect hyper-locally in person, and also obviously support yourself in the process, go to the show notes or just go to thewayforward.com/join. And again, the way forward is spelled the way, FWRD.com/join to become a member today. Help us build the way forward for mankind.
I wear mine a lot of times in this studio, I will say, because these lights can really get to me.
I could be wearing them right now, but guess what, Alec? It's the middle of the day and we're in a dim room. My body's already like, what is going on? Like, you were just outside. It was like 100,000 lux on a sunny day. And now you're in this kind of like dungeon. What's going on? Like, where did you go? If I put on blue blockers, now 50% less blue light is in my eye. Yeah, that's going to balance the spectrum a bit more, but my body's going to be even more confused. I would rather supplement with infrared. That's what I do. Like if I have to be indoors behind glass windows, which filter out infrared, especially the low E ones, that's the design of them.
It's so wild. Don't some of them filter out UV as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Dude,
UV and infrared gets filtered out by windows.
I have this SunSense bracelet from my friend Danny Hamilton. Shout out to her. Yeah, she's awesome. She's super rad. I was actually just with her this morning and my wife are really good friends. And it's so wild sitting inside and having the sun come through some of the windows, not in all houses, but in some environments. And these don't light up in the way that they should, which is so trippy to see because people assume just naturally that they're getting some level of sunlight by being inside, but you're limiting some of the spectrum that you should be getting. which is why you have to get outside.
The invisible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum is more important than the visible, like probably, because you have UV, you have infrared, and then you have everything else. And we can't feel like that. We can't see it. So it's really hard for people to grasp that. But yeah, low E windows, low emissivity, that's what they're designed for. And why are they designed for that? For energy efficiency. Why are incandescent bulbs banned? For energy efficiency. Why do we have no infrared light in our lives anymore? Because of energy efficiency. So you need to either realize that, change your windows, getting incandescent bulbs is a bit easier, but more importantly, go outside as much as you possibly can.
You know what's so frustrating though, dude, is we bought our house as it was being built. And we talked to the general contractor and we were like, hey, there's some minor changes, minor in air quotes, that we wanted to make on our house. And we could basically do none of them because they claim it's non-standard. They claim they didn't even have the possibility to do some of these things. We said that we would pay extra for certain things, like instead of having the spray foam insulation, we wanted some form of wool or something like that, some more natural materials. They were like, we don't have the capability to do that. We said, we'll pay more. We talked about the windows. We talked about the smart meter on our home. When we called the energy company, they were like, we don't even know how to do that on homes anymore. I'm like, bullshit. There's no way you don't know. It's probably talking to someone who claims they don't know because no one asks that. But it's just like the level of inconvenience on the level of knowing all of these things, but trying to have it done in a different way is so astronomical at this point. That is so frustrating, man. It's so unbelievably frustrating. Even with our Wi-Fi company, our internet company, we tried to talk to them about hardwiring our house and they were so confused on how they could get that done. I'm just like, what?
I did the same thing, man.
It's like just a few years ago, people were hardwiring their homes. What do you mean?
You used to be able to just like type in the IP address of your Wi-Fi router and disable the antennas. You can't do that on new routers anymore. I'm buying a place in central Wyoming on some land and it's kind of my buddy, my good friend, is doing the renovations. It's who I'm buying it from. And I'm like, yeah, man, I want to get like partially grounded flooring tiles. I want like low iron or acrylic glass windows. I want wool insulation or paper insulation. And he makes fun of me. Some of the things we got like 100% wool carpets, which used to be the standard and it actually lasts longer. And I think there's mostly copper piping, but some of the stuff he's like, dude, I don't know where to find this shit. Like
crazy, man.
But imagine, that's my good friend.
Yeah.
You're talking to some general contractor who's, an NPC. They're like, man, I just want to go home. Like, I just want to do my job. Like, this guy's asking me about things I've never even heard of. It's
Dude,
really
it was
hard.
Funny too, because each time we would talk with him after the first few where he would come back and inevitably say no, we would always ask again. He'd be like, yeah, I'll get back to you. And then my wife and I are like, we might as well just stop asking for this shit.
Yeah.
He's got to say no.
Man, that's a business right there is custom kind of home design and things like that. And I think it's going to get more popular. Like we were looking into some of that stuff, the wool insulation. It's actually, my buddy was like, wow, the R value, the insulation value is actually pretty good on wool. If this was at scale, this would be a super great solution. So it's like the more people that are aware of these things, the more people ask questions, then that's how, change happens. But we're in the first inning of that probably for a lot of this stuff.
Well, think about like on the energy conservation, if it is truly about that, if you have a breaker that's able to switch off at certain parts of the day, certain areas of the house, like at night, that's going to conserve energy. You're not going to have as much energy output.
Tell me in general, if you're circadian like minded in terms of your thinking, if you had like 20 incandescent bulbs, but you only have like 10 of them on, they're super low wattage, the rest of your house is dark versus some dude who's blasting 5,000 Kelvin cool white LEDs, you're probably still going to consume less energy. And that's where Scott Zimmerman says this, who does a lot of the infrared research. He was like, we've switched to energy efficient lighting, but because we use so much more lighting, we have saved zero amount of energy generation and electricity consumption. So if people actually just turn on their lights less at night and use warmer, like infrared rich incandescents, that would be like winning on both fronts. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that they're almost like contraband at this point. And I mean, you can buy them on Amazon, and if you really are aspirational.
Has this administration lifted any
I don't know. Someone asked me that recently.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie. I've been looking into, I think for daylight, we're going to do a little incandescent drop for fun as like an add-on if you buy one during the holidays, or if you just want to buy some. I've been talking to suppliers in China, and I don't really care. I'm just going to do it and see what happens.
Is your house all decked out in incandescent bulbs?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's actually not the best solution during the day because it has almost no blue light, but I work outside pretty much all day long. During the winter, I do have like a 250 watt incandescent bulb. It's like a giant chicken lamp, and I'll probably going to experiment with getting some other kind of like brighter, maybe LED based solutions to combine with that. But yeah, I mean, I work outside as much as possible during the day, and then at nighttime, some warm incandescents or candles.
You bring up a good point on working outside. Shameless plug for your device. That's what I've noticed about this the most, dude. When I have my iPhone or my laptop outside, I notice that I'm like really squinting to try to see it, which means I'm inevitably holding it way closer to my face. Versus this, you can see very clearly outside. How does that work?
Modern displays are emissive. So imagine taking a flashlight outside and turning it on. You see nothing. But in the dark, you see very well. And that's because it's an emissive source of light is trying to compete with the environment that it's in. Now, when you're outside, you're competing with the sun. And we're talking again, like this room right here versus outside, probably 10 to 50,000 times difference in light intensity. That's how great it is. Even if all the lights were on in here, probably be still 1 to 10,000 times difference. And that's why when you go outside, you're like, oh my God, I can't see. And that's also why we're so energy deficient, is because that's how much energy we're leaving on the table. Because all of that is light energy. It's not the same as biochemical energy, but we can utilize it. And that's what we should be utilizing.
Dude, I'm wondering how much biochemical energy we actually need, or if the whole model of like carbs, fats, proteins, micronutrients converting through digestive processes to ATP, like is really how our body furnishes energy. I'm wondering if, like, dude, Dr. Pollack's work.
ATP is not energy in the sense that we're taught what it is. There's no way. Like it doesn't even add up. Gilbert Ling literally like already disproved this stuff, right? And Pollack's work continued that. And it really is exciting, but it's fundamental, right? Like what's energy at the end of the day? There's many different forms of energy. There's photonic energy, there's electrical energy, there's biochemical energy. And like, for example, I'm big on seasonality, especially living in Wyoming. And I think almost no influencers and people online talk about the importance of like locality and embracing winter and cold. What happens in the winter is your body actually gets, when you get cold, you uncouple your mitochondria and you inherently produce less ATP and more heat as a byproduct. Now that heat is always known as like wasted energy in modern systems, but in biological systems, it's by design. So you're actually producing less ATP on average. Your body produces more mitochondria to kind of overcome that, but you have energy in a different way. And that's also
Wouldn't that mean more infrared too?
Exactly. And so then there's like a whole biophoton discussion, which is weak ultraviolet light, but there's so much there to unpack. And of course not, right? Like, of course it's not all biochemical. And any fitness influencer that's telling you calories in, calories out, which is hilarious. The dietitians and the gym bros are citing thermodynamics to support their argument of calories in, calories out. They have never taken a physics class in their entire life. Like, bro, like that does not make sense because that's a closed loop system. We are open loop. The entire environment is impacting energy in and energy out. And it's not just biochemical. It's all facets of this. And that's the real equation that you can never solve. And we're not energy sufficient. We are energy deficient. We're not able to utilize the energy because we have dysfunctional energy systems or mitochondria because of the environmental mismatch that we're in. So it's really hard to communicate that to some people.
Dude, I mean, I get it. It makes a lot of sense to me. And like, I look at everything. I don't know if this is a little bit too rigid, but I look at everything in terms of what deconstructs the fourth phase water of our bodies versus what helps build or enhance easy. That's it. Like, that's how I look at it. And when I look at our modern environments, I mean, Dr. Pollack has not necessarily published papers in his labs, but I trust he's talked about it enough, and he's done some studies with glyphosate molecules, with various sources of non-native EMFs, and he's showing pretty conclusively that they are deconstructing the exclusion zone, that's how we get the charge separation. That storehouse of negative charge is basically a storehouse for potential energy for our bodies to do work. And it's like, it just makes sense looking at it that way.
Yeah. And water is an electromagnetic antenna, really. Like it absorbs and emits electromagnetic fields and has coherent domains. And that's like been proven. So, and we're 99+% water from a molecular count perspective. So to discount that in general is really foolish, but this is where we're actually just scratching the surface completely. And there's so much there to unpack, but it all comes back down to really simply align with nature. And the more you're hyper connected to your local environment, your body knows what to do. Why? Stop trying to figure it out. We're going to slowly get there. Maybe AI will help us do that. Who knows? But yeah, there's a lot more. And that was why it was one of the most important aspects of our product to be able to be used outside, right? I think that's maybe the biggest detriment to modern technology is that we can't use it outside. The iPad would be so less alluring if you used it in your backyard, because you have this environmental stimulus that's almost like, it's almost leveling it out. It's relativistic, right? Like if I'm in this room staring at if I had it full blast staring at it, I'm going to be so sucked in. But if I was outside staring at it, there's cool stuff around. There might be something to climb on if I'm a little kid or a truck goes by and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, like I want to check that out. But that's it. And we've been completely removed. We were an outdoor-based species and now we're an indoor-based species. And that shift has been the biggest change, the biggest impact. So we have a reflective display technology similar to a Kindle, which was really the inspiration behind the product overall, is how do we make it work with nature, with our biology, and be more analog, be more paper-like. It's really intended to be a magic piece of paper. And the reflective technology works just like everything else in nature. The plants and leaves are green because they reflect green light. They don't emit green light. That's why at nighttime, everything's black because there's no more light. The only emissive sources are the sun, fire, and some, weird algae that kind of gives off some weak light. But that's how it works. So even the way we're consuming that light being more reflective and how any kind of natural piece of paper also works is much more synergistic with our biology. And then it makes it able to be used outside. And then there's no light coming from it at all. The battery lasts longer. It doesn't overheat as much. So you can even, in Texas here, a 95-degree day, you use your daylight way, way longer than a normal MacBook or a normal iPhone. And we're going to make that even way better once we kind of figure out a few more things.
What are some differences between this and a Kindle?
Yeah, so Kindle was the inspiration. All e-readers, they're great, right? They're like a digital book. They brought this kind of magic, almost like Harry Potter newspaper to the world, but it was limited, right? It's too slow. Anyone who's used a Kindle, it's like, these been around for 20 years and it's still like the same thing. It's like great for reading, for turn paging, but if you try and do anything else, like it's too slow. The Remarkable tablet, all these other e-readers, they're fantastic, but they're for reading, note taking, and that's about it. So we wanted to bring a display technology that feels like digital paper, but can do more. It can do email. It can go on the internet. It can go on social media.
YouTube. That's what was so wild to me because I'm used to how Kindle appears, but seeing that this functions and YouTube works as if I was on a normal device was really cool to see. It's literally a fully functional tablet.
That's the innovation, is the display technology that we created. And that enables, I like to say it's like we created a Kindle on steroids, which now means it's a healthier iPad or it's a healthier computer, because you can now connect a keyboard and have a stand and use it to type, use it to search on the internet at this stage, because the functionality is basically the same. And that's the main core difference here. And no one has done that before.
Have y'all thought about coming out with a phone?
Oh yeah.
Are you working on one?
That's the most heavily requested product by far. I would say eventually we will do that, but phones are extremely complex and you really have to get it right. There's so many different directions we could go. And we're really focused on making the tablet better. We're focused on getting potentially into schools with this launch of Daylight Kids. And we didn't even realize how many people wanted to use this as like a fully functional computer. Like we almost originally created for it's like, you know, the best reading, writing, typing experience. And then if you want to browse on the web, like some people will do that. But now everyone's like, man, if you had a front facing camera, I could take all my meetings on this outside. I almost
like that it doesn't have a camera though, too. I'm sure you get a lot of that from the people who are like sketched out by the privacy. We're trying to think of a way, how can we put a camera in there that's only visible when you use it? We will do that soon. But yeah, because I'm the same way. I love my Daylight. It's the first screen I look at. And it's usually if I'm, behaving well, it's the last screen I look at. And then if I go outside when I take a break or I'm journaling or like actually know I'm going to just be writing for a couple hours, it's amazing. But I still, I'm working a lot. So I still do a lot of work on my MacBook. Yeah. And that's because I take way too many meetings a week. So if we did have the camera, that would unlock, that will come soon in general, future products. But we're really focused on the tablet for now. Monitor, phone, these things have been thrown around. We're exploring. We're for sure exploring. That's what's most exciting about this, I would say, is like, we get to decide the next products. Yeah. And I'm just like thrilled at what we can do. The light spectrum is awesome right now. We have the blue light free backlight that's flicker free because we took the circuit out that does pulse width modulation and put in DC current. And we have a blue light free backlight that's amber in tone, but it's like we could get infrared in there. Yeah. We just need to get the right LEDs to fit what we're doing. EMFs, like there's a lot we can do on the EMF perspective going forward. Smart airplane mode is coming soon, which will just turn it into standby airplane mode after a couple minutes if you're not using it. Wow. So it'll automatically shift into airplane mode.
Which is like step one. So easy. Like anyone could do that. It would take Apple literally 4 hours to do that because they have so many people. For us, it takes a bit longer. And then we can go from there. Low EMF mode. Hey, YouTube is probably the only time you need like full output power of RF because you're transmitting that much data. Most people on Daylight are like reading, writing, maybe surfing the web. What if we just reduce the RF output by like 80%? And call it low EMF mode. And if you need to toggle it back on, you can. That's an easy way to do it. There's so much more that we can do now that we're like acknowledging these things are potentially harmful. And then we'll see. And we just want to make the whole experience as warm, as low stimulation as physically possible. And this first product we're thrilled with, but it's just a starting place.
Dude, what I've loved is the amber slider that you have to turn it more amber. I feel like amber, you can kind of see the coloration a little bit better. My friend Daniel White showed me that.
I was with him this morning.
Were you with him this morning? How's his knee?
It's better. We're swimming at Barton. So
that's awesome. I love that guy. Yeah. So he was showing me all this, like the amber mode that it's on. Dude, it's just so well done. And your branding and your aesthetic and your website is all so well done too. Man, it's amazing. Before we get to Daylight Kids, I want to talk a little bit more about the non-light spectrum of the EMF spectrum as it pertains to our phones, like what people typically talk about with the non-native EMFs coming off them. Can we talk about that a little bit with our phones and our tablets and our devices?
Yeah. So you have the radio frequency range, which is what we're using for telecommunication. And what most people don't realize is that your phone's pinging probably like 3 to 10 frequency bands at any given moment if you have all of them on. And some of them do exactly the same thing. So Wi-Fi is typically 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz now. That's why you see the 2.4G or the 5G on Wi-Fi names. The cellular tower is, 3G was typically going up to like 1 gigahertz. Now 4G went up to like 2 to 3 gigahertz. And we talked about 5G. 5G actually has 3 bands within it. And the first 2 are kind of what 3G and 4G used. And then the third one is the millimeter waves. So that's only going to be used in those areas that I mentioned before. but your phones have the capability of that. New phones have the chips to actually ping those networks. So you can turn 5G off in your settings. That should work. Or you can get an iPhone 11, which doesn't even have the chip to access those bands, which is great. But yeah, the number one tip I give people is like, if you're at home, turn your phone on airplane mode and then connect to Wi-Fi. You do not need to have Bluetooth and cellular data on, because everything you can call through Wi-Fi now. You can text through Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is much weaker than cellular data. It's like cellular data is the strongest because it's got to ping a tower that's, half a mile away or more. So the output power is going to be highest. And then your Wi-Fi router is next. And then Bluetooth is typically very, very low power in general.
Is it true that cellular data is actually worse if the tower's further away?
If you have worse signal, your phone will boost output power 2 to 5x to get that signal out. So if you're like 1 bar, oftentimes I'm in Wyoming, like 1 bar in your car where there's like physical barriers, your phone's going to boost output power extremely high. The other time your phone boosts output power, which is really important for your audience and anyone who uses airplane mode, the second you take it off of airplane mode, and I'm happy to show you this on my meter, it boosts to the highest possible output, because what you have done when you went on airplane mode is you severed the connection. There is a consistent connection between your phone and the towers, your phone and the Wi-Fi router at all time. And
Even on airplane mode?
What's that?
Even on airplane mode?
No.
Okay.
It's constantly pinging the network to be like, I'm here. You turn on airplane mode, you sever that connection. Then right when you go and turn airplane mode back off or turn it off, it will boost to the highest output power. It's like, where are you? Towers, routers, I want to connect to you. And that's why you should always kind of like wait like 20, maybe 10 to 20 seconds before you pick up your phone or put it on your body again. It's not ideal, but that's kind of the reality of how it happens. No, airplane mode works. I mean, you can measure it. It definitely works in terms of cutting all of the radio frequency. So the Wi-Fi antenna, the cellular chip, the Bluetooth. The Bluetooth, you have to be careful because Apple has that ridiculous, like in the shortcuts, if you click it off, it doesn't always go off. So you got to make sure it's actually toggled off in the settings. Again, I swear they just make it harder for us. But GPS and other things, that will not be fully like disabled by airplane mode. And people think it's just RF EMFs. They're actually, there's power running in your product. Uses a battery. Laptops have a bigger battery. Batteries, although are DC, they emit a magnetic field. And that is also problematic because magnetic fields affect our biology. We actually are designed to take magnetic fields. Weak static magnetic fields are what we are designed for. There are no radio frequencies that exist on planet Earth in the range that we use for telecommunications. I go to where I hunt in Wyoming. I take my meter. It says 0, 200 megahertz to 8 gigahertz, 0. The Earth has a natural magnetic field that's weak, but we are designed to take that as an input signal. It drives biology. It drives circadian rhythm. They've put people in Faraday cages. And even when they reintroduce things like light, sometimes unless they reintroduce the Schumann's resonance, they're still messed up. And it is that important. That alone can drive circadian rhythm and biology. And it fluctuates. It fluctuates on a 24-hour circadian basis. It fluctuates geographically. So the magnetic footprint here and in Wyoming is different. And then in Australia, it's completely different. The directionality is different. The strength is different. And DC magnetic fields from technology can interfere with that. People often ask, why are EMFs bad for us? I try and give this layman explanation. In engineering, we have 2 terms. We have electromagnetic interference and we have signal to noise ratio. Those are the 2 terms I always use. The more interference you have, the harder it's going to be able to actually get the real signal. And we have mostly noise, mostly interference. So the actual signal from our planet, from our purpose or path that we're meant to be on,
from God, possibly, right?
Yes, 100%.
From the ether,
from wherever the signals we're meant to consume have been diluted, they're interfered with, and we're mostly consuming noise. Now you wonder why everyone has no intuition. They can't read energy anymore. They're not sensitive. This is dehumanizing our population, and that's the real tragedy. And that's because of the light. That's because of the entire electromagnetic spectrum that we've created.
Amen, man. Man, it completely recontextualizes the importance of grounding. Like I already, after learning about Dr. Pollack's work and doing a deep dive on that over the last 2.5+ years, started to really realize that grounding is more than just like, oh, like it's nice to put my feet on the earth. It's like, no, I'm actually receiving negative charge from the earth, and my body quite literally runs off of negative charge, the charge separation of the fourth phase water. And then bringing in what you just said about the Schumann resonance being incredibly important, that's a whole nother element to it. It's like without that specific frequency coming off of the earth, and maybe you could try to mimic it with some biohacking things. I don't think we can though, dude, because that's based on the preconceived idea that what we can measure with human instrumentation is telling us all there is to know about the important things we receive from our connection to the earth.
Here's the thing. Nothing in nature is consistent. It's always cyclical. Like the Schumann's resonance varies tremendously. That's why there's like a first, third, second, fourth harmonic, right? It's 7.83 hertz. And people like say, not all the time. If you look at the graph of the Schumann resonance, well, it's completely dependent on the geomagnetic environment that we're in. And yeah, what you said about grounding, the research of Clint Ober and Gaetan Chevalier, what else did it show besides reduced inflammation? It regulates your circadian rhythm. It regulated cortisol rhythms. What is that saying? When you connect to the earth, you're giving it the information it needs to know where in the world you are, what time it is. That's incredible. That's probably more important than the fact that, the inflammation thermal cameras went down, in my opinion, because you can't even explain that. Like, how is that possible? When we step on the earth, are we getting a stronger input of the Earth's magnetic field, and then that's regulating our circadian rhythm? Like, we don't even really know, but that's been proven. I mean, proven, if someone's going to debate that it wasn't a quality study, but you know, inherently. And that's what's so fascinating. And then you can go down the rabbit hole of the geomagnetic environment and how that's affected us. And we were just in the peak of the solar cycle. That's a real fascinating conversation. And if you want to get real, even more esoteric about the magnetic field weakening and potential like pole flips happening.
Dude, it's pretty wild because I remember when I was at West Point, before I woke up to any of the health stuff or government corruption, I did used to just sort through the CIA's declassified archives. And there's this whole thing on there talking about like geomagnetic behavior of the earth and potential like pole shift and things like this. And
I want to read those files.
Dude, it was pretty wild to read. I will say that. Like it was really sketchy actually.
But that's was cool. Like Robert O. Becker, what was the other book? I forget his name. It's blanking on me now. But Energy Medicine is a good book. He talks about this stuff as well.
Because Body Electric's Robert O. Becker's
book, right? Yes. And he wrote a second book, Cross Currents, that most people don't read. I highly recommend reading that because it gets even more into Body Electric is like very technical. It's talking about like injury current, like semiconduction at, the bone.
Is it accurate in terms of electrical engineering?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's great.
He did this stuff like in real-time experiments. But his other book, Cross Currents, is more on the full electromagnetic environment. And that's a great read. But yeah, Energy Medicine, I believe it is, and Robert O. Becker, they both talked about just in general, like geomagnetic events. When there was high geomagnetic activity, like storms and everything, people with mental health issues had way higher incidence of like checking into the psychiatric issue or hospital, like flare-ups in general. And there was, I think, some crazy research saying like there was like 90,000 excess heart attacks in Russia over like a 50-year period attributed to geomagnetic activity. And yeah, our magnetic field has reduced in its strength around like 30% the last few hundred years, and it's accelerating. So that's a real interesting rabbit hole. But we just made it out. So the solar cycle, the magnetic poles of the sun flips every 11 years, and we just are coming out of the peak period. So you can make this argument, what's been the craziest years of the past like 10 years? I mean, 2024 and 2025 have been pretty crazy. So it's also the peak of the solar cycles. You can actually probably test some of that to the geomagnetic experience. And if it follows like 2028, 2029 will kind of be like the most mellow. And then the next 11-year cycle will peak around 9 to 10 years from now. So, and that's really fascinating to think about. And it's like, why is no one talking about this? Like, this is probably the most important thing. Like, the Earth could potentially be at risk if these geomagnetic excursion events are real. And they have happened coincidentally every like 12,000 years. And there's all these biblical scriptures of, floods and the reset and the black sun and the long night. So, but imagine if you told it, well, they could probably tell people anything now, and they're so like desensitized, they wouldn't even blink an eye. But in general, you wouldn't tell the public that. Be like, well, there's a 30% chance the world ends in the next 100 years. I don't really know what to do with that information.
Yeah, I know. Hey, y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model, whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled. We have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well. So my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also Remedy Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there.
I want to go back to the phones just a little bit more though, and talk about, because you're probably much more well-versed than I am on this piece, but it is something I think is incredibly important. How telecommunications technologies are quote unquote tested for safety. Just unbelievably wild to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. To this day, they use what's called standard anthropomorphic mannequin, which is a dummy, basically like a crash dummy, that they fill its head up with liquid. And if I remember correctly, it's like my height and weight.
6'2", 220 pounds.
That's literally my height and weight, 6'2", 220. So someone as big as me, that is a dummy, that they fill its head up with liquid and they hold the device a certain distance away from it. We're talking about a phone here, for example. And as long as the liquid inside the head doesn't heat up over a certain degree, either Fahrenheit or centigrade, they deem that the technology is safe. Is that
pretty much? I mean, it's pretty close. You're spot on about the bio dummy, 6'2", 220 pounds. The metric they're measuring is called specific absorption rate, SAR. And if you ever seen SAR standards, this is what they're talking about. So yeah, they basically use that test to then like calculate the specific absorption rate like in tissue. So it's not indicative of really anything real. And even if it was,
is it even the right metric though?
No. I mean, like specific absorption rate is like not, because of this reason, it's like not a good metric at all for that. And even if it was, you're talking a 6'2", 220 pound adult male. Okay. How about like a 9-year-old child? How about a woman who might be like 5'2", 100 pounds. The biological difference there is so vast. And you're right as well. They measured at certain distances away. And if you actually go into the manufacturing warning labels, they have a statement that says you should not like hold your device zero distance away from your body, pretty much. It says always use like 5 millimeters of separation or 10 millimeters of separation or hands free. So they kind of like cover their ass with these statements and these shoddy ways of.
It's such BS because it's so deep within the settings of the phone that no one is going to find. And you know, with Apple's technology, they could easily have something where if they literally see with the front facing camera or the IR camera that you have.
Oh yeah, they could turn it off or lower it and all
like
that.
A warning that pops up on the phone, you're holding the phone too close to you. They could have done that so long ago, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things we're looking at is like we can get a position sensor. So imagine if you have a position sensor, you're holding the tablet and it sees where you are in space and maps it out. And then the antennas have some antennas, definitely in telecom antennas, not so much in consumer, but I think we can figure it out. They can have a directionality component to them to where we only emit out and away from the user.
But it's still able to receive a signal then though too.
Yeah.
Because like all the other things are omnidirectional.
So like imagine the Wi-Fi is like everywhere, right? Like it's here, it's there, it's there, it's there. So where your device kind of outputs for receiving and transmitting doesn't matter really. It shouldn't matter. So that's something that for future gen products, that one's going to be a challenge because again, no one's ever really done this before, but that's where my head goes. And yeah, what you're saying is very true. And you think about a child's skull. It's thinner. They have higher biological water content, like way higher. And the younger they are, the higher it is. And there's already research that shows like 10x increased kind of effect of RF EMFs in absorption, 10x absorption in a child's bone marrow in their skull. And yeah, there's no protection for children for this stuff. And we've used the same standards for decades. I mentioned that 10 milliwatt per centimeter squared that still exists. Although the peak output transmission because of battery technology isn't really the problem now, but we're around these signals literally 24/7, 365. And you think it's like, how did this all happen? Well, you're talking about the biggest industry in the world, like technology. And it started with the telecommunications industry. People think like Apple's the bad guy. Actually, it was like Motorola, because that's when this stuff started to come out. 1996, that was the year I was born. Telecommunication Act. 1996. I need to fact check this, but some people say it's the most lobbied bill in history. Probably inflation adjusted. Maybe that's the case. And AT&T, like Motorola, they have these agencies like the CTIA that lobbied so hard. And what that act said was the government basically has full say on where wireless infrastructure can be placed. So they can put it on top of schools, on top of hospitals. If they wanted to, put it on top of your house, they can, and you can't do anything about it. And that really set the scene for the telecom industry to do whatever they want. That's why the 5G repeater towers are like everywhere. And you can't, you can sign all the petitions you want, but that legislation really gave them.
Did they just use like eminent domain laws to do that?
Probably. I don't know. I think, some people have just been like, hey, all of a sudden there's like a cell tower like on my property. You probably just get like a notice and then it happens so fast that you can't do anything about it.
Even on your land.
Yeah.
It's insane. That is insane. They've got to use some sort of eminent domain law.
But yeah, definitely on public properties, like even if it's a school or a hospital or, a park, that doesn't matter. They don't care. And for a lot of schools, like they fought this stuff for a while, but it doesn't matter. And whenever research came out, like we talk about these guys like Robert O. Becker, Milton Zara, Alan Frey, like these are the OG guys that got canceled. Like all of them, that was in the 60s, then in the 70s, then in the 80s when Becker went on 60 Minutes, and they all got canceled. They all got their funding stripped. Back then, it was the military that did all the research and stripped their funding. And then in the 90s and 2000s, what the telecom industry figured out, they're like, well, crap, like some people are starting to come out with some concerning research. Dr. Henry Lai was one of them, and he found that 2.45 gigahertz exposure, frequency and exposure, which is the same that we use for cell phones now and Wi-Fi, can cause DNA damage. And that was like damning. And Motorola they freaked out. Like they have these internal memos that came out like, how are we going to like quench this in the press? How are we going to have like an anti-smear campaign? And they basically did that. They paid millions of dollars to discredit him. He got his like funding stripped, and that was the playbook. And then what they came up with was, okay, Now we're going to fund studies. We're going to research this. So they started pouring millions and millions into research studies, but they designed them very specifically. They designed them oftentimes not even using real technology. They use like simulated technology or kind of some signal generator. And they were always like really poor quality studies. And of course, what did they show? They showed no harmful biological effects. So then Dr. Henry Lai and some other Swiss researchers, I think Cal Berkeley at one point, they basically looked at all of the studies over like the past 2-3 decades, and they tried to break it up with percentage of harmful biological effects by who funded the study. And pretty much like 2/3 or more, or some of Dr. Henry Lai's work was like 90+% of the studies funded by the government, funded by the NIH, whoever, was showing harmful biological effects, where like 20 to 30% of industry funded studies were showing harmful biological effects. So they just completely muddied the water. They paid media and all this stuff. And that's why people are like, well, it's perfectly safe. But if you actually go and you look into the details, not saying it's definitive proof, but it is certainly very concerning, warrants complete skepticism. And to this date, now they don't research it at all. Like 5G got rolled out with nothing because there's no incentive to study. And the last big studies were done on 2G and 3G, the National Toxicology Program study, the NTP study, and they spent $20-30 million on that. And they did find that these frequencies were causing cancerous tumors or strong evidence of association with cancerous tumors in rats. And then that was a controversy. And then a study in Italy came out. It's basically the same thing, same results. And then that program got cut completely. That's technically in the Human Health Services Department. So maybe RFK will bring that back, maybe not. But it shouldn't matter because that's enough proof for me to be concerned. And it's like, why would we have this giant science experiment? And well, you're not studying 4G and 5G when they're being rolled out. Well, that's kind of tells you all you need to know. And to this day, now it's like we're exposed to so many different frequencies constantly. Like I said, there's like 5 to 10 plus. Okay, let's add in the electrical power. Let's add in the magnetic fields. No one's ever studied the real complete picture, because there's too many independent variables.
That's what I was going to say is like at this point, they almost have plausible deniability because they rolled out this technology, put out some shoddy studies that they had a bunch of money to back them. They had the media to back them. So they had all them in their corner. So then a few of us pop up saying, hey, there's actually no evidence that this is safe. And they use the burden of proof fallacy, but most of the public doesn't even know what logical fallacies are. They'll say, well, prove it's not safe. And it's like, no, the burden of proof is on you to prove that it's safe to begin with. And then they refer back to these nonsensical studies, and no one knows about the other data and the other studies that are out there, that there's a strong indication that these products are harmful to our health.
And it's like, come on, guys, who are we talking about here? We're talking about like the telecom industry, like big tech, or like, yeah, big pharma, big food, big ag. Like the Bitcoiners always like harping on the central banking system. Like, well, you're going to trust like the big tech companies now all of a sudden. Like it should be the logical, like kind of cautious assumption regardless. And a lot of people do have that opinion, but number one, it's the most inconvenient truth. No one wants to believe it. I don't want to believe it. I hope I'm wrong about everything and that we're just fine. And, sometimes when you have blissful ignorance, it actually can help you. But
belief is a big piece. Placebo, nocebo effect.
Yeah, exactly. And, but like, that's kind of the reality of the situation. And we do use these devices and technology all day long. So we should be pretty kind of incentivized to figure out how they're affecting us. And that's all we're trying to do. And I think what's exciting is if we can never, it's almost easier to notice something's bad for you when you get rid of it. So if at daylight we can provide the healthier phone or iPad or tablet, you're going to realize how bad the other stuff was like pretty quickly. And that's sometimes the only way. And if you want to figure that out before, we develop all these products, go camping. Go in an environment where these things don't exist. Don't bring your screen. There's no EMFs, go in the middle of nowhere, and you will get the best sleep. You will actually be able to think clearly. You'll have time to reflect. You get the real signal, and you'll reset your circadian rhythm. It only takes a couple days. And when you come back, you will realize what's bad for you. You will feel it. And that's what's humbling for me very often, because I live in central Wyoming. I've probably spent 75% of the last 3 months living off grid completely, mostly hiking and hunting. And then I went to San Francisco at the beginning of this trip. And every time I go there, it like by 3 o'clock, I'm totally drained, like totally just drained. My Anjan, my CEO, makes fun of me. He's like, dude, every time you come here, your pupils are so dilated. He's like, I know you're here. He's like, appreciate the sacrifice, because my body is so hypersensitive to the environment. And I think something in the health space that often gets miscommunicated is sensitivity can be a bad thing and like resilience is the goal. It's like, no, humans peak human existence is the ultimate sensitivity to your environment. And I experienced that at the highest level. And the reason why everyone is so dehumanized is because they no longer can feel, because they're so overstimulated. They're so captured cognitively that the body's nervous system response is to shut down. That's what it does. So they can no longer feel. So they're desensitized. They're dehumanized. We want to reverse that. We want to bring back sensitivity so you can actually be a human again and have that intuition and have the full experience. But yeah, that's a realization that I think is pretty jarring to people, and it'll make traveling, it'll make changing environments, changing a lot of things kind of uncomfortable. But it's only when you do that you realize it.
Well said, man. Well said. You know, for me, when I began this holistic health journey in 2016, I thought at the time, like, I eat all these foods that I don't really notice any negative effects, but my wife does, so I'll do this with her. But then when I went back to eating, going out to a restaurant, whatever it was, and the way that I previously ate, in those moments, I felt like dog shit, dude. I felt so horrible. And I was like, did I always used to feel like this? Like, what's the deal? And I think what you just spoke to makes a lot of sense. It's that I've recalibrated my sensitivity to things that my body is supposed to be a little bit sensitive to, because it's like alerting me that, no, that's not it. That's not what we're supposed to be connecting with. That's not what we're supposed to be consuming.
Your body's really good at adjusting and compensating. But every single time it does that, there's an energetic cost. And when you realize, you look back, what was I really that healthy? Well, you didn't have the energy. How many cups of coffee were you drinking just to get by? Who in this world wakes up and raw dogs life? Pretty much no one. Even the health people, they're like on a bunch of stimulants. I mean, the biohacking community is on some other stuff at this point. But anyway, that I digress, because it's like, and then how much energy do you have to really tap into what matters? Well, you don't. And that's why like everyone has got their head in the sand and they're just doing. They're just getting along. It's not until you realize that we're also energy deficient because we've just given it to our environment to compensate for the toxins, for the misalignment. And once you get that back, you will never want to go back to the way you lived before and having that experience.
Amen, man. Amen. Since you mentioned schools and we've talked about kids a little bit, I want to talk about Daylight Kids. So you have one of the kids version tablets there too. So talk me through Daylight Kids and what you guys got going on for our kids.
Yeah. So we launched Daylight to the public last May. Went really well. Sold out in couple weeks, mostly on Twitter, like 100% organic. And response was incredible. We spent the rest of 2024 kind of figuring out supply chain, logistics, the team, the company. We're still a small startup, so a lot of this was just growing, and it was great. We got it out into the world. We finally got ahead of inventory this summer, so not too long ago. And then we were thinking, okay, like any smart company, you're like, well, who should we target? Well, this is for everyone. Okay, well, that's like, we need to be successful. Where can we have the highest impact? where is the largest unmet need, where not only do we need to spend less of our energy convincing people that we have a solution, but we can also have a bigger impact. And naturally that will compound in a greater way because that's like organic. And that just is the best way to do business, in my opinion. Like where energy flows, you go. And it was obvious. It was people with severe neurological conditions, concussions, severe eye strain, like they can't even look at a screen. That's pretty niche. And we definitely really are working to get into that community. And then it's kids. 2025, I don't need to convince any parent, and I definitely don't need to convince any teacher that screen time is the number one issue in their life for the most part. And they don't know what to do. They're damned if they do. They're damned if they give them the iPad. And they're damned if they don't. Because being a parent's hard. Being a teacher's hard. I mean, the teachers, it's pretty much mandated. And what changed my opinion was I talked to all these superintendents in New Hampshire and they're like, yeah, we give Chromebooks in kindergarten. I was like, what?
Insane, man.
They're like, yeah, since COVID, we give them out. One-to-one learning starts in kindergarten, 6 years old. Some of them are 5. Insane. Absolutely insane. And they were saying it was insane. They're like, this is crazy. I'm like, why is it? I was on slide 1 and I talked to these superintendents and these teachers for 20 minutes before I presented any slides. Why? Because they already knew. They're like, yeah, this is such a problem. I was like, why is it a problem? Tell me about it. They're like, the kids are not okay. Why? They don't know how to communicate. They will never look you in the eye. Like they are so enthralled into the digital world, into their screens, that they're no longer children. They don't like play outside. They just don't even know how to have a conversation. They're not interested in anything else. And they were really concerned. So that was transformative. And I was like, we need to do this. We were always going to do it, but I was like, no, we need to do this now. And let's try and do something for back to school this year in 6 weeks, which was a fun little sprint. But it was because we had already gotten such great feedback. Like early customers were just kind of like you. They bought a Daylay and they let their kid use it. And they're like, yeah, this is great. Like we didn't have any screen time. My sister, my nephew is about to turn 4 years old this weekend. And he had nothing for 3.5 years. And then was like, yeah, let's try the Daylay. And he's gonna be a little product tester. And she's like, it's amazing. He'll like draw on it for 5 minutes. And then he'll be like, I want to go play outside. And that's the point. It's more boring than the backyard, but it's interesting enough to teach them in the digital world because that is important. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to go back to living in a hut on the mountains and not interact with anyone in the digital world, that's where we're at. And, you know, you can build businesses, you can inspire generations and thousands of people, millions of people, and you can learn anything. But the double-edged sword is that it's so detracting now. So how do we have the good of technology without the bad? And for children, that's even more important, right? Because they're so sensitive, as we've discussed at length, and they're so eager to kind of learn things and be curious and get kind of stuck in something. So the device really needs to be as low stimulation as possible. And that's what we did. So we made a custom software that's very similar, but you get to lock it down, have parental controls that are super simple, blocking ads, trackers, social media, and you have a device that is boring enough for your kids that it won't consume them. They won't have a tantrum. They won't be iPad kids, but it's exciting enough for them to learn a bit in the digital world and prepare them for living in a modern world. And we're really excited. Also, I'm just so much more passionate about this. Like, no offense to some of our like early customers that maybe it's the third device and they have, you know, they're wealthy and I really love them, but I want to change generations. I want to really change the trajectory that humanity is interacting with technology in a positive way. And we have to do that with the kids, because if we're seeing all these negative effects now, like we just started this science experiment. Like 2010 to 2013 was like the smartphone era. The COVID era so the smartphone era was like giving smartphones to teenagers, and Jonathan Haidt brilliantly wrote about that in The Anxious Generation. 2020, the COVID era is like we're giving iPads to 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds, and they're getting it all day long, starting at 6 years old in schools. We just started that. We don't like in 20 years, if we made no change, imagine the impact. Like I don't even.
It's insane to think about, dude. It is insane to think about.
We need to intervene. We need to change the trajectory. And we think the daylight computer is the best first device to give your children. And we're never going to tell you at what age that is, because that's up to you. Maybe you have the luxury of homeschooling and you're going to be kind of Waldorf-esque and not give any tech till 10 years old. Amazing. I love that. But most people don't have that luxury. Most people are going to public school and they are giving devices at 6 to 8 years old. So not only is this direct to consumer push, but I'm actively looking to get into schools. If you are strong armed in that community, please reach out to us. We're looking to provide daylights to pilot to education programs in K through 4 range, because the younger we think is a better target, especially for the tablet to start. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take going to the low stimulation alternative and seeing the benefits. And we've seen it dramatically, especially with neurodivergent or kids with autism, especially the nonverbal kids, because they're struggling. But another statistic that blew me away is 15% of public school kids now are on individualized education plans. That means they're special education. 15. I mean, I think probably when we were in high school or middle school, it was probably like, 1 to 5% max. And we see all of this is indicative of our environment. So those specific segments are going to need this and value this even more, because it is just that important. And we're really excited about it because we're going to have the biggest impact there. And talking to moms, they really don't, it's stressful. I mean, dads as well, fathers, like parents don't know what to do. They don't want iPad kids and they don't want to raise a Luddite. So
I'll share my experience, man. Like, so our kids, we have 3, 8-year-old, 4-year-old, and then a 6-month-old. And our kids go to an alternative school near here, which they love, and they are outside most of the time. We love that. But we live in a neighborhood with a lot of kids, which we really love, because they are getting this sort of like 90s, early 2000s kids experience where they're outside most of the time. And with that being said, some of their other friends have parents that we love, but see things a little bit differently than us, and that's okay. And inevitably, some of those kids are on screens a lot more than our kids are on screens. And so our kids are naturally, as they hang out with them more, wanting to be on screens more. And it's like this conundrum that we're in, where we don't want them to be made fun of or to be left out from their friend group in the neighborhood. But at the same time, we have the knowledge of the harmful effects, the dopamine addiction associated with these products. So it's such a weird line to walk, whereas this is quite literally, this being daylight for those who are listening, the solution to that problem. It is the solution to that problem, because it's like, okay, yes, device is great. Here's the device that we're going to give you. And then we can educate those parents around us like, hey, I know you're probably struggling on what to do. Most parents are, whether you're holistically minded or not. Like, everyone is pretty much on the same page, but it's like, what do we do about it? So this is a really easy sell, even to those who don't have any of the knowledge of anything that we've discussed during this episode, except they want to be able to get their kids off of devices more. They know that their kids have an unhealthy attachment to them. You present them this solution and it's like, it's an easy sell, man. It's an easy sell.
And like, you'll realize it quickly. Like that's what's cool about all this, like returning to nature and simplistic. I mean, if you swap like cool white LEDs with incandescent lights, you'll just like, oh, it feels warmer. It feels inviting. It's like, does it pass the grandma test, right? And it's the same thing with the devices, right? Like, does it like actually capture them? And when you take it away, will they lose their mind? Like, someone came up to her, like so many kids at the Weston A. Price conference were coming up to our booth and drawing on it. And I literally remember it distinctly. The father had one son who was crying, and they're like, all right, to his other son, he's like, we need to go. And he was just drawing on the daylight. And he's like, no, we need to go. He's like, put that down. And he took the daylight away from him. And the kid was like, okay, let's go. And he's like, whoa, he didn't like freak out like I thought he was going to. And I was like, I guess that works.
Man. I guess it works. Right. That's
But
good,
yeah,
man.
another customer was like, yeah, it's more interesting than my son picking his nose, but less interesting than the backyard going outside and playing. And if we can find that little happy medium for a long time to come, I think that's what it's all about. So if anyone also like, we're looking to learn from parents, like what you just shared, that's huge. I think it's spot on. I don't have a family of kids yet, so I don't even know. I'm drawing inspiration from places just from talking and networking and listening. And we want to listen. We want to co-develop with parents. Like, this is Gen 1 early product. Like, what do you guys want to see? How do we get into schools, whether it's micro schools, private schools, public schools? We're willing to offer pilots. And if you are homeschooling, we're actually approved for a lot of states are doing homeschooling ESAs now, or kind of just like non-public school, like educational assistance. So in some states, you can use that funding to buy a daylight. So it's pretty cool. Education is reforming for the first time in like ever. So we're happy to potentially be a big part of that.
Epic, man. Epic, epic, epic. As a final question, or maybe one of the final questions, because I'll probably think of some other ones, but what are some of the other products you guys are working on, if you can share? If you can't share, that's totally fine.
I mean, I'll just say things that we're strongly considering or like have been heavily requested are certainly a monitor.
Dude, I'm talking like even a house TV. Like, I did a TV with this.
Monitor, phone, heavily requested, but things on our like mood board, or whatever you want to call it, magic giant whiteboard, calendars. Like, we do see ourselves more as an environmental design company than a product like a tablet or a consumer electronics company. People love the Pebble watch. So like a watch with the screen, same screen technology. Yeah. Like calendar, different surfaces, right? Like, imagine if it was all kind of like these, instead of the smart home being full of these harsh OLED screens, it's kind of like warm daylight displays. And then, yeah, maybe lighting. If I had it my way and we had like all this fun time to do side projects, I would fix lighting. I would fix wireless technology. I know you wanted to talk about Wi-Fi. There's some things we could do. Like, there's like hacked Wi-Fi routers on there where you can load different firmware, and it could automatically go to sleep at night. It could have a low EMF mode. You could disable it. You can do all that stuff. It's not that complicated. You just need like a few engineers and a supply chain.
It really does just like lead to the questioning of like, why, given that this could be really simple to do, why hasn't it been done?
And the timing is perfect because everyone's aware of these things now. If we were 5 years ago, it would have been too early. If we're 5 years from now, maybe it's too late and society is just so down the rabbit hole of a bad path. But also the accessibility to supply chains and manufacturers is way higher than it used to be. You used to have to have an investor introduction or all this credibility. Now I can like ask AI to give me like 10 vendor names, or just go on Alibaba and like find people who are making Wi-Fi routers or incandescent bulbs. And, we can make a version of it that's better. So it's really cool. Like, bringing products to market is definitely easier. And we have so many fun ideas in that capacity. But yeah, like, as kind of an EMF nerd, how do we fix wireless technology? That's a great question, because although I hardwire my internet, no one really is going to do that, I think. I mean, if you had an office setup where you never saw the wires and it was just like plug in, plug out, but you're not going to completely forego the Wi-Fi. People just aren't going to do that. So how do we fix it? And let's start with the home at first, because that potentially is pretty solvable. And what Li-Fi is, which stands for light fidelity, is just using, instead of the radio frequency band, it uses the kind of light frequency bands for telecommunications. Now, the upside of that is people think, well, those are frequencies and wavelengths that our biology is familiar with. I don't really think of it as much of that. I think it's interesting because you can have high data transmission and a highly directed beam. Like, you can use the infrared spectrum, you can use the ultraviolet spectrum even for Li-Fi. There's like different technologies. But when it's that high of a frequency, it's pretty much a laser. So you're talking like a single just beam. And what would be cool about that is it's kind of like wireless wired. Because imagine if there was a Wi-Fi or a Li-Fi box router on top of the ceiling, and it was just shining directly down into your like device, and it never really hits your body. Like, think of that.
That would be wild.
To me, that's more of where I think this needs to go. And there's guys that argue that also it would be less biologically impactful, even if it did touch your body, which could be true. We don't really know. And I do want to go back to where I think it's not just the frequency, it's just modulating the wave in general. So we don't really know. But if you can get out of the wave path, out of the line of sight of the harm, then it's just as good as wired, because then it's zero. You have zero exposure. So I think that is actually very feasible. This technology already exists. So for a home environment, I think you could really do that. And what you could do is, like, if you had like a home laptop setup, you could even have like a kind of transceiver like extending outwards from your device. And then it would be really easy to not be in the line of sight there. There's a lot around environmental design there, but traveling, wireless infrastructure, I don't think that's going to change.
If anything, it'll get
There's
worse.
so much just ingrained and invested. It's like trying to fix the power grid. It's just not going to happen, right? Like, we have a 60 hertz power grid. As much as, people like to say, well, if we had a DC power grid, things would be better. Yeah, maybe that would be true, probably. But it's not going to happen. You could probably, I bet people start building DC houses and use DC appliances. If you're super EMF sensitive, I think that's a good idea. But yeah, I think there's so much. And right when you acknowledge like that these things are a problem, all of a sudden the only barrier is execution to solve them. All these things are solvable. I have a million ideas. I'm sure even you're talking about earlier, it's like, I think we can solve a lot of problems. And now it's just like, we need the community to support, and we're there. People are ready for solutions.
Amen, man. Okay, this is my final question now. Because you brought up like the power grid and you brought up different sources of power, I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes, and one of the ones that's been most fascinating to me is the Tartaria rabbit hole. I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole too.
Not deeply. I've actually, someone was talking to me about it last weekend.
So supposedly there might have been, and I want to emphasize might with an underline, bold letters, and asterisk, there might have been a use case for some of these dome structures that have like the Greco-Roman architectural style that we see in like the Capitol buildings. I don't know if it's actually Greco-Roman, but that's what I think of it as. This uniform architectural style across the earth, that there might have been technologies where it could harvest energy from the ether, essentially, like from the air, for lack of a better term, for people who aren't interested in calling it ether. What are your thoughts on that? And then Nikola Tesla's technologies from your understanding?
Yeah. And if I had a lot more time, I probably would be diving down all these rabbit holes a lot deeper. But surface level, I'm open-minded to anything and everything. And I think for sure, right, there has to be so much that we're missing. And like going back to these like geomagnetic excursions and the ancient civilizations, like Graham Hancock people, it's like all this stuff kind of makes sense, that there was clearly some intelligence that was lost and some technology that was lost. And it doesn't mean that it was greater than what we have now, but it certainly seemed that it was very different, and it was more aligned with like the natural world, and it's not so kind of confrontational to what we're meant to be doing. So I'm open to it. Tesla pretty much died of like EMF poisoning and hypersensitivity. He was like a wreck. And that's like two examples, both him and Marconi, guy invented like the radio. That guy had like 9 heart attacks in like 3 years. And Tesla was super schizo by the end, because they were just playing around with like electricity and radios all day long. But with that aside, anytime someone's inventions and entire life's work are completely like confiscated and covered up, is warrants another look. And yeah, it would be cool to try and create technologies like that and start to experiment with things that are maybe even more esoteric. But
yeah, because it's possible that like the whole electric versus oil and gas thing is another false dilemma.
Yeah, totally.
It's totally possible.
And, some people talk about like scalar waves and the ether and things. And I'm open-minded. I've talked to these people. I interviewed a scalar waves guy as well, and he said he gave me like free whatever. He was going to do scalar wave healing on me remotely, and I'm like, okay, sweet. Maybe it doesn't work so well because I'm already like so kind of focused on what I'm doing. But you know, science is meant to be curious, and we don't have science anymore. We have controlled research. So I would love to open it up, right? And something that's really cool about daylight when we're successful is we can kind of do whatever we want. And I'll tell you right now, we already think about that stuff. Is like, you know, one of our kind of investors actually was talking on the phone last week, and this guy's like an EMF guy, but he's like, there's very, you know, specific frequencies. They're like, what if we tune the speakers to 432 hertz and like the very decimal place that's the most healing? What if we put an antenna on the PCB, on the circuit board that is tuned to like the Earth's frequency or some resonance frequency? And guess what? We might just do stuff like that and not tell anyone. And then they might just feel even better. And yeah, like it might work, it might not work, but let's see. And that's, I know you mentioned earlier at some point, like the harmonizers and the stickers, and for the most part, I mean, I could say concretely, none of those products have any evidence or proof that they work in the classical sense of physics. They do not mitigate electromagnetic exposure. However, and I always caution when companies spend a lot of money on marketing and then they have these studies that they all say the same thing. It's like Tristan cut his arm and then healed in X amount of time. And then when he had the thing nearby, it is what it is. But people like Gaetan Chevalier and some of these more esoteric researchers, they say the same thing. But what he told me on my podcast was, Tristan, I tested these with some like Japanese energetic like tester to see if any of them would work. And I bought all the stickers, all the pendants, all the harmonizers. He said 98% of them did not do anything, but a couple of them did. And I don't know how they work. Maybe it's biogeometry, maybe it's resonance, maybe it's
I'm wearing two
whatever.
of them, Aries Tech and then the biogeometry pendant from Ibrahim Karim.
There's definitely something there, but when it's really, nobody actually knows. So when there's so much kind of copycats or just fraudulent marketing and greedy people, it's going to be really hard to say that. But I would say if you have the means and you think it's going to make you feel better, try it out. Maybe it'll just be placebo. Maybe you'll just feel good wearing a necklace. Maybe a sticker on your phone will just make you remember to use it less. I don't know. That's for you to decide. But I'm not going to sit here and ever recommend or tell you that you should spend hundreds of dollars on anything, because most of the EMF mitigation is going to come from things that cost $0, like doing less. And
like getting out in nature. That's why I always say, man, like there's not going to be a replacement, even if some of these things do work. And it's interesting because Aries Tech, like I interviewed the CEO, Josh Bruni, and they have some pretty compelling information behind them. But I said on the show, and I stand firm on this, like there's not going to be a replacement for just getting outside and getting away from the non-native EMFs. There's not.
So a lot of time, if you look, I've seen a lot of their marketing. It gives people a false sense of security. And I think that's a problem. So I'm totally okay with, I mean, it's a free market, I guess, libertarian, free market, pro, whatever. I don't know exactly, but I support it and people should try it out. And I have one at my house. Someone sent me like, I always try and talk to these companies and also see if like what they say when I like grill them or anything. And one of them is like a crystal orb thing. And I think the science there is that it's more around like negative ions, which I actually firmly believe that's true. I think like negative ion generators, again, you're never going to replace nature, but that's real. I was looking into that more recently because, you know, so fascinated by like my mom's hometown being this fresh air resort. Well, what does that mean? Well, fresh air in nature, in the mountains, near water, near the beach, they have way more negative ions. So you want to talk about grounding? It's in the air. It's actually in the air too. So not only have we insulated ourselves from the negative surface charge on the planet's surface, we have gotten diluted and polluted the air. So now it's actually more positively charged because of non-native EMFs and pollution in the air. So
have you read Dr. Pollack's paper on we might be breathing charge and not oxygen?
no, but isn't his new book's called Charged?
Yeah, and that's more about weather, and he may go into the breath a little bit there. That it's fascinating, but I got to send you the paper where he talks about how it might be that oxygen is important to us, not because it is oxygen, not because of the actual substance, but because it's a good electron donor. And he brings up a good point where nitrogen molecules make up roughly 78% of the air we breathe, and oxygen only makes up 21%. Nitrogen molecules are smaller, but somehow our alveolar membranes only accept oxygen and not nitrogen. How would that make sense given the nitrogen molecules are smaller? And he goes into how deep sea fish in environments that are basically like lacking oxygen entirely are still supposedly filtering water through their gills that is pulling in oxygen and it's oxygenating the fish's blood, which doesn't make sense if they're in like a basically oxygen depleted environment. So he postulates in the paper, if I remember correctly, that it's that oxygen is a good electron donor and we're actually charging our blood through the alveolar membranes. And that's what's happening. It's not that we're oxygenating our blood, we're charging our blood. And that deep sea fish might possibly, I don't think he says this in a positive claim sort of way, but he sort of postulates, is it possible that deep sea fish are filtering in anything that is giving them negative ions through their gills? And it was really interesting to see it that way. So like breathing, I look at food in a completely different way as it is. Like sunlight, I consider food, given the like bioelectrical model. Grounding, I consider food in a different way. Breathing, now with Dr. Pollack's paper, and it makes total sense, I consider food. And it makes sense that like we are depleted of nutrition in these positively charged environments that we're breathing in constantly, which is why it just feels good to go out and connect in a natural environment and breathe deeply there. Of course it does. Makes so much sense.
Couldn't agree more. I think air ionization is going to be kind of the next grounding that people talk about a lot. I want to talk more about it. I think it's amazing. When I go back to Wyoming after one of these trips, the literal first thing I literally park my car, I go for a walk, I get back from that walk, and I take a deep breath, and I can actually take a deep breath. Like when I'm in San Francisco, probably when I'm downtown here, I can't breathe deeply. Like my nervous system's just activated. And the food analogy is brilliant. I think Pollack, I already know, like that makes total sense. I mean, the circulatory system in general, right? I'm sure you've read Cowan's like heart is not a pump. It's all charge separation, right? Like how else can you squeeze a red blood cell 3 times the size of a capillary? The math doesn't even work. So it's all there for us. And that's where, environmental design is the most important thing. So
Amen,
how do we bring that back to people's front of their mind?
Amen. Dude, thank you so much for joining me. And I'll say one more time, like this device, it's not just about the device itself. It's about how this device is better to be used outside than other devices. So it naturally wants to get you outside. You're able to use it while you're outside. But even being on the device, it's not as distracting, not as dopamine driving as typical devices. So you again naturally want to connect with nature. So it's so much more than just what I'm holding in my hand. It's everything else that is sort of tangential to it that matters. So I just appreciate so much, man. Like I've interviewed a lot of people that have great products and technologies, and I'm stoked about several of them. This has got to be one of my favorite things because like I'm actually using it every day since I've figured out how to set it up, which was super easy with the onboarding process and everything. Super intuitive. And I just appreciate what you guys are doing so much. So thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Alex. It's been a pleasure.